Doctors were stunned. The veteran was saved by an emergency call. But when they checked the tapes, the caller was a wild wolf. Sam Coldhand, a Lakota veteran, was alone and waiting to die. Forgotten by the world, isolated from his family. He believed his life would end in that cold, silent cabin, lost in the howl of a blizzard. And the night his heart finally gave out, he was almost right. Only one living soul was there to witness it. Not a person. It was Ghost, a wild white wolf he had rescued. And what that wolf did next rewrote the laws of loyalty and survival forever. The wind made a sound like a mourning woman, a low, keening noise that slipped through the cracks in the cabin's log walls. It was the only sound Samuel Sam Coldhand had heard for 2 days, save for the dry crackle of the wood in his stove and the occasional dull throb from his own left leg. This was Pine Ridge in deep winter. Not the picture postcard snow, but a brutal, elemental force that erased the world. They called it a whiteout, and Sam felt the name in his bones. He, too, was being erased. He sat in a worn armchair, the springs groaning beneath his weight. His leg, a map of old scars from a jungle half a world away, was propped up on a stool. The cold made the metal pins inside it feel like icicles driven into the bone. "Damn wind," he muttered, his voice a dry rasp. He wasn't talking to himself. He was talking to the framed photograph on the mantel. Sarah. Her smile was the only warmth left in this place. "You'd have hated this, Sarah. You always said the wind sounded lonely." The wind didn't just sound lonely. It sounded like memory. If he closed his eyes, the high-pitched rush of the snow wasn't snow at all. It was the rotational beat of helicopter blades. The sharp cracks of the frozen trees weren't the cold. They were rifle fire. Sam squeezed his eyes shut. Not now. Not here. He was an old man, a Lakota Sioux who had fought for a country that barely remembered him, living on land his ancestors had died for. But in these moments, he was just a terrified young man in a jungle, waiting for the noise to stop. A sudden, violent gust of wind struck the cabin, and the fire in the stove sputtered, inhaling a draft of icy air. The flames died down to a dull, angry red. Sam cursed, a real sharp curse this time. The wood. He was low. The pile by the door was almost gone. He stared at the last 2 logs. Going out there was a fool's errand. The whiteout was a living thing, a predator. It would steal his breath, blind his eyes, and turn his blood to slush in minutes. But the alternative was freezing to death in his own chair. With a groan that was half pain and half resignation, Sam grabbed his heavy sheepskin coat. He forced his bad leg into a boot, his teeth clenched against the jolt of pain. He pulled a stocking cap down over his gray braided hair and wrapped a scarf around his face. He opened the door, and the world vanished. There was no sky, no ground, no trees, only a swirling, suffocating void of white. The wind tore the breath from his lungs and shoved it back down his throat as ice. He squinted, able to see no more than 3 feet. The woodpile was 20 yards away. It might as well have been a mile. He followed the guide rope he'd strung between the porch and the woodpile, his gloved hand clamped onto the frozen hemp. Every step was a battle. His bad leg dragged, a dead weight. The wind shrieked, mocking him. He reached the woodpile, a vague, snow-covered mound. He fumbled for the logs, his fingers already numb. He tucked 4 of them into the crook of his arm, more than he should carry, but he refused to make this trip twice. He turned back, and for one terrifying second, he couldn't find the rope. Panic, cold and sharp, flared in his chest. He was disoriented. The cabin was gone. The world was gone. He was just an old man, lost in a storm. He felt a phantom touch on his shoulder, the cold hand of death. He stumbled, his bad leg giving way. He fell to his knees, dropping the wood. "No," he breathed, the words stolen by the wind. "Not like this." He scrambled, his hands searching the snow, and that's when he heard it. It wasn't the wind. It was a sound so thin, so high-pitched, it barely registered. A weak, desperate cry. He froze. An animal? A coyote? A rabbit caught in a snare? He crawled toward the sound, pushing against the wall of snow. He fumbled past the woodpile, toward the base of a large pine, one that had been struck by lightning last summer. There, in a hollow at the root, was a small, shivering bundle of white fur. It was a pup, a wolf pup. Its eyes were barely open, its body trembling against the impossible cold. And it was white. Pure white. Sam's blood ran colder than the wind. A white wolf? Shungmanatu Thanka, the sacred, the spirit. His Lakota soul screamed at him. "Wakan, holy, you do not interfere. This is the hand of the Thanka, the great spirit. This is its fate, not yours." The pup let out one more cry, a sound that wasn't a cry at all, but just a small puff of air. It was dying. Sam stared. The traditionalist in him told him to walk away. The old broken man in him understood the desire to just let go. But the soldier, the man who had held his dying friends in a jungle far from home, the man who knew what it was to be cold and alone and given up for dead, that man acted. He didn't think. He didn't pray. He scooped up the tiny, frozen body. It weighed almost nothing. He unzipped his coat and shoved the pup inside, against his own chest. He found the guide rope, his hands now sure and steady. He gathered his wood. He walked back to the cabin, the wind now a defeated enemy. He kicked the door shut, plunging the room into the dim orange glow of the dying fire. He laid the logs down and gently pulled the pup from his coat. It was still breathing. Barely. He laid it on an old blanket near the hearth, not out of love, but out of a grim, cold sense of duty. "All right," Sam grunted, stoking the fire back to life. "I brought you in. The rest is up to you." He looked at the small, white creature, a mere ghost of a life in the flickering light. "If you make it through the night, that's fate." He sat back in his chair, the pain in his leg returning, the wail of the wind outside unchanged. But now, there was a second, tiny heartbeat in the room. He named it Ghost. It had been 3 months. The whiteout had yielded to a brittle spring, and the world was no longer a void, but a stark etching of black trees against thawing snow. The pup had survived the night, and the next night, and the one after that. Ghost was no longer a pup. He was an adolescent wolf, a silent, lean shadow of muscle and bone. His white coat was thick, his legs long, and his eyes had changed from the milky blue of infancy to a piercing, pale yellow. He did not behave like a dog. He never barked. He never fetched the sticks Sam sometimes threw out of sheer curiosity. He never begged for food, though he ate hungrily what was offered. He was a presence, not a pet. He watched Sam with an unnerving, intelligent stillness. The cabin was no longer empty. The silence was no longer Sam's alone. It was shared. Sam was sitting on the porch, rubbing the ache in his leg, when he heard the sound. It was the mechanical whine of a modern engine climbing the dirt road, too smooth to be a local's truck. He tensed. Ghost, who had been lying invisible against a patch of dirty snow near the trees, rose to his feet in one fluid motion. He didn't make a sound. He just appeared. A blue Subaru wagon, mud-splattered and anxious, pulled up. A woman got out, her dark hair pulled back in the tight, no-nonsense bun of a nurse. Lena. his daughter. She slammed the car door, her movements quick and efficient. She was carrying a bag of groceries and a face full of worry. "Dad?" she called out, her voice sharp with the city. "Why didn't you answer your phone? I left 3 messages." "Phone's broke," Sam lied. He hadn't charged it in a week. "It's always broke," she sighed, climbing the steps. She kissed his rough cheek, her eyes doing a rapid professional assessment. "You look thin. Are you eating? The cabin smells different." "It's the wood," Sam grunted, turning his face away. He hated this. Her worry felt like an accusation. "I brought you some real food, not just that canned garbage. And I'm going to check your blood pressure." She pushed past him into the cabin, all business. "This place is freezing. For God's sake, Dad, it smells like a..." She stopped. She had dropped her grocery bag. A can of chicken soup rolled across the uneven floorboards. Ghost was standing in the doorway of Sam's bedroom, watching her. He was absolutely silent. Lena didn't scream. She was a nurse. She was trained for shock. Her hand went to her mouth, and she took one slow, deliberate step backward. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Get behind me now." "He's fine," Sam said, walking slowly in behind her. "What is that?" "His name is Ghost." "That," she said, her voice rising with hysteria, "is a wolf. A wolf, Dad. Are you insane? Have you lost your mind? He was dying. I brought him in." You tamed it?" "I don't know," Sam said honestly. "We just live. It's going to kill you. It's going to get rabies. I'm calling the tribal police." Before Sam could answer, a second, louder noise interrupted them. The sputtering diesel clatter of an old pickup truck. It came to a halt behind Lena's Subaru, the engine cutting out with a cough of black smoke. A heavy boot hit the gravel. "Sam, you in there, old man?" a gravelly voice yelled. Sam's shoulders tightened. Marcus. Marcus was a local annoyance, a non-tribal man who lived on the edge of the reservation, trading in gossip and bootleg whiskey. He stomped onto the porch, his heavy jacket stained with grease. "I got your medicine, Sam," he said, holding up a paper bag that clearly held a bottle. He pushed open the screen door without knocking and stopped, a greasy smile spreading on his face as he saw Lena. "Well, hello there. I didn't know the old man had such pretty company." "Get out," Lena said, her voice shaking but firm. "Feisty," Marcus chuckled. He took another step inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. And then he saw what Lena was staring at. Marcus froze. Unlike Lena, he didn't whisper. He let out a sharp, barking laugh. "Holy hell, Cold Hand. The rumors are true. You really did it. You're shacked up with a..." Ghost moved. He didn't growl. He didn't snarl. He simply materialized from the shadows of the bedroom and stood between the two men. He was shorter than Marcus, but the power in his shoulders was obvious. He didn't lift his lip. He didn't have to. He just stood there, his yellow eyes locked on Marcus, his body a silent white wall. The air in the cabin turned cold. Marcus's smile vanished. He was a bully, and bullies only understand one thing. He took an involuntary step back, his hand bumping the door frame. "Easy, boy," Marcus stammered. He looked at Sam, his bravado gone, replaced by a primal fear. "You're crazy, old man. You're living with a devil." He stumbled backward, tripping off the porch. He scrambled into his truck, the engine catching with a roar, and his tires spun in the mud as he fled. The cabin was silent again. Lena was pale, her back pressed against the wall. Sam looked at Ghost. The wolf held his gaze for a second, then turned, walked silently back to the hearth, and lay down. The threat was gone. Sam's leg was throbbing. His daughter was looking at him as if he were a stranger. But the feeling that flooded his chest wasn't the usual fear or the familiar loneliness. It was warmth. It was strength. For the first time since the jungle, Samuel Cold Hand felt unequivocally safe. He looked at his daughter, his voice quiet but with a finality that brooked no argument. He stays. Lena stared at him, her nurse's composure cracking, her eyes filling with tears of fear and frustration. "Dad," she whispered, "you've left me no choice. I'm making a call." Lena had left. Her departure was as cold and sudden as the spring wind, leaving a silence in the cabin that felt heavier than before. She had made her call, not to the police, but to a cousin who worked for the tribal council, voicing her official concern. She had also, in a fit of nursing-driven frustration, installed the medical alert system, a gray box with a cord that plugged into the wall and a plastic pendant with a single red button. "You're isolated, Dad. You're not safe. If you won't wear this," she had said, her voice tight with unshed tears, "I will be back with people who can make you." Sam had watched her drive away, then snorted in disgust. He took the pendant and tossed it onto the high kitchen shelf next to a chipped mug and an old box of shotgun shells. "More white man's leashes," he'd muttered. Ghost, who had remained out of sight during the entire tense visit, padded silently back into the room and lay by the hearth. That night, the pain came. It wasn't the usual dull throb in his leg. This was a living thing, a memory of fire and shrapnel, awakened by the cold and the fresh, raw wound of his daughter's fear. It crawled up from his ankle, ignited his knee, and seized his hip in a vice of agony. He gasped, his knuckles white on the arm of his chair. His pills. He needed his prescription painkillers. They were on the low, rickety table beside him. He leaned forward, his body rigid with pain, reaching for the small orange bottle. But as his fingers brushed the plastic, a violent spasm, a delayed kick from a long-dead mortar, shot through his leg. His hand jerked. The bottle flew from his grasp. It didn't just fall. It skittered across the floorboards and with a final, mocking rattle disappeared under the heavy, dark wood hutch that held his wife's old china. "No," Sam whispered. The word was a puff of air. He slid out of his chair, his bad leg collapsing under him. He landed hard on his hands and knees, the impact sending a fresh wave of sickness through him. He was on the floor, helpless. He reached under the hutch. His fingers met nothing but dust and cold, empty air. The bottle was too far back, nestled against the wall. He tried to shift his body to get more leverage, but the hutch was low and heavy. His shoulders wouldn't fit. The pain in his leg was so intense now that his vision was starting to tunnel. Panic, cold and acrid, rose in his throat. He was going to be trapped here, on the floor, an old man defeated by a 2-inch gap. Ghost was on his feet, whining. Not a bark, but a low, anxious sound deep in his chest. He padded over, pushing his cold nose against Sam's cheek. "It's gone, boy," Sam gasped, his forehead pressed to the floor. Can't reach it." Ghost seemed to understand. He lowered his own head, peering into the dark space. He shoved his narrow muzzle into the gap, sniffing. He tried to get his paw under, but the angle was wrong. He looked back at Sam, the pale yellow of his eyes reflecting the dim firelight. "It's no use," Sam grunted, defeated. He closed his eyes, preparing to just endure. But Ghost did not give up. He stood, perfectly still for a long moment. He looked at Sam on the floor. He looked at the gap under the hutch. Then he looked across the room, at the hearth. He walked away. Sam felt a pang of something, disappointment. Even the wolf knew it was hopeless. He heard a soft, metallic clinking sound. Not claws on wood, but metal on stone. Sam turned his head. Ghost was walking back to him. He was carrying something, holding it carefully in his jaws, balanced perfectly. It was the fire poker, the long black metal rod with a small hook on the end. Sam's breath hitched. It was impossible. Ghost walked directly to Sam, laid the poker down on the floor, and then, with his nose, nudged the handle firmly into Sam's limp hand. Sam stared, his mind reeling. This wasn't fetching. This wasn't a trick. This was cognition. The wolf had understood the problem. Object out of reach. It had identified a tool. It had delivered the solution. His hand, shaking for an entirely new reason, closed around the metal rod. He stretched his arm out, the hook on the end of the poker catching the darkness. He swept it back and forth. He heard a clink, then a rattle. The orange bottle rolled out across the floor. Sam grabbed it, his fingers fumbling with the cap. He dry swallowed 2 pills, leaning his head back against the hutch, his body trembling with aftershock. Ghost sat watching him, his head cocked, his tail giving one single slow thump against the floor. Sam looked at the wolf. The yellow eyes weren't animal. They were ancient. They were knowing. The pain in his leg began to recede, replaced by a feeling so new, so profound, it terrified him. It was a bond. It was a debt. He reached out a trembling hand, not to the wolf's head, but to its powerful shoulder. He felt the solid warmth of the muscle beneath the thick fur. "Thatcha," Sam whispered, the Lakota word tasting strange and forgotten on his tongue. Friend. He was no longer just a ghost. He was a presence. And Sam, for the first time in 30 years, was not entirely alone. The bond once formed settled into the spaces of the cabin like smoke. The quiet between Sam and Ghost was no longer empty. It was a shared territory. Sam would sit on the porch, his knife moving over a piece of cottonwood, carving the shape of a hawk. Ghost would lie at the edge of the trees, a white statue in the dappled sunlight, his yellow eyes tracking the flight of a real hawk overhead. The understanding of the medicine bottle had changed everything. Sam spoke to him, not in commands, but in conversation, telling him about the wood, the wind, and the ache in his leg. This fragile peace lasted until the drone of a heavy truck engine climbed the road. It was not Marcus's sputtering diesel. This was a well-maintained, official engine. A dark green Ford F-150 with the circular emblem of the Oglala Sioux Tribal Police on the door rolled to a stop. Ghost, who had been dozing, was on his feet in a silent, fluid instant. He didn't retreat. He stood by the corner of the porch, his body tense, his gaze fixed on the truck. A man in a tan uniform and a ranger's hat stepped out. He was tall, solid, and had the same dark braided hair as Sam. He took off his sunglasses, his face serious. Sam's heart didn't sink. It tightened. He knew this man. "Dave?" Sam grunted, his voice a low greeting. He didn't stand up. "Uncle?" replied Dave Black Elk, his voice respectful. He nodded toward the carving in Sam's lap. "Hawk?" "Trying to be." Dave's eyes moved from Sam to the white wolf. He didn't show fear, only a deep, profound seriousness. He slowly, deliberately, rested his hand on the empty holster at his belt. "He's bigger than the rumors." "Rumors travel fast," Sam said. "Marcus talks too much." Dave confirmed the source. He filed an official complaint with the tribal council. Vicious, captive animal. Public menace. Said it was a devil. I told them Marcus was an idiot. "But it's on paper now, Sam. That means I have to be here." Sam's knife stopped moving. So you're here to… what? Arrest me for saving a life? I'm here to stop the feds from doing it, Dave said, his voice sharp but low. You know the law, Uncle. Federal. A wolf is not a dog. You're harboring an endangered, protected predator. If a U.S. Marshal gets wind of this, they won't come to talk. They'll come with rifles, and they'll put a bullet in him. Then they'll put you in cuffs. Let them try, Sam said, the old soldier in him flaring up, cold and hard. Is that what you want? Dave stepped closer, his boots on the bottom step. A firefight? To die on this porch over an animal? He's more than that. Dave sighed, the sound heavy with frustration. He looked away, toward the Black Hills, sacred and ancient. When he looked back, the ranger was gone. In his place was the nephew of Ben Black Elk, the man whose dying words Sam had carried out of a burning jungle. It's worse than that, Sam, Dave said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. It's not just the white man's law. Sam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. I spoke to the elders, Dave continued, his gaze unwavering. I had to. The word is out. A white wolf, here, with you. And they are concerned. Dave struggled with the words. They say a white wolf is walking. It's a spirit, a messenger. It's not a pet. He said the word pet like it was a profanity. He's not a pet, Sam growled. Then what is he? Dave pressed, his voice full of a sudden, desperate energy. He's a prisoner. You're owning him, Uncle. You're holding a spirit captive in your house. It's an insult. It's an imbalance. You don't keep a messenger. You listen and you let him go. You are angering the spirits, Sam. That's what the elders say. That's what I say. Let him go before he brings you sorrow. The words hit Sam harder than a physical blow. The U.S. Marshals, the law, the government. He understood that fight. He'd been fighting it all his life. But this was a betrayal from his own blood, his own tradition. Sam stood up, his bad leg forgotten. The hawk carving fell to the porch, splitting in two. He limped down the steps until he was inches from Dave, his face a mask of old, cold fury. You come to my home, Sam hissed, and you talk to me about imbalance? Sam, I'm trying to help you. You tell those elders. Where was their balance when I was 18, dying in a jungle for their flag? Where were the spirits when your father… Sam choked on the name, his voice breaking. I held Ben Black Elk in my arms while he bled out in the mud, Dave. He was calling for his mother. Where were the spirits then? Dave flinched, as if Sam had struck him. Where was the Thanka when Sarah was sick? Sam's voice was a raw wound. She died in a white man's hospital, full of tubes, and no spirits came. This cabin, this grave, was all I had. And then he came. Sam pointed at Ghost, who was standing at the top of the steps, his yellow eyes burning, watching them both. He was sent. Not by your elders, not by your government. He was sent by something else. He didn't bring sorrow. He brought me my poker. He saved me. He protects me. Sam was trembling, not with cold, but with a lifetime of rage. He is the only thing in this world that has not abandoned me. And now you, my people, you come to take him away. Sam. Dave's face was pale, his eyes filled with a terrible, torn grief. That's not what I… Get out, Sam whispered. Uncle, please, get off my land. And you tell the elders, you tell the U.S. Marshals, you tell anyone who comes. Sam Coldhand is not alone anymore. Dave Black Elk looked at the old man, broken and defiant. He looked at the white wolf, powerful and silent. He saw a bond that he could not understand, and it terrified him. He put his sunglasses back on, his face becoming a mask of official duty once more. "I'll hold them off as long as I can, Sam," he said, his voice flat. "But I can't stop what's coming." He got in his truck and drove away. Sam Coldhand stood for a long time, the wind pulling at his hair, until the sound of the engine was gone. He was alone again. He turned and looked at Ghost. He had defied the law of man, and he had defied the law of his ancestors. It was just him and the wolf, against all of it. The silence that followed Dave's departure was thick and toxic. Sam sat on the porch until the sun dipped below the pines, his body rigid. The split hawk carving lay at his feet. Betrayal. It was a cold, familiar taste. He had been betrayed by his country. Now he was being betrayed by his own people, his own tradition. He limped inside, the cabin feeling small and stale. Ghost followed, his paws silent on the wood, and lay by the hearth, his yellow eyes fixed on Sam. The unspoken alliance was palpable. "It is just us." Then the phone rang. The sound was a violation, a shrill digital shriek that clawed at the quiet. Sam stared at the phone on the wall. It could only be one person. He let it ring 5, 6, 7 times, the sound drilling into his nerves. Finally, he snatched the receiver off the hook. He didn't say anything. "Dad?" Lena's voice was tinny, fast, and stripped of all patience. This was not his daughter. This was Nurse Coldhand. "Dad, I know you're there. I just spoke to Dave Black Elk." Sam's knuckles whitened on the receiver. He said nothing. "He told me everything, Dad. The laws you're breaking, the traditions. He told me what the elders are saying. Do you hear me? You're putting yourself in danger. You're putting him in danger." "He's fine," Sam growled. "He is not fine," she shouted, her voice cracking. "And neither are you. You're not well, Dad. This obsession with this animal. It's not healthy. You're isolated, you're paranoid. Marcus is telling everyone you're a menace. The council is meeting. You are not safe." "I am safer than I have ever been," Sam said, his voice dangerously quiet. There was a pause, a long, cold inhalation on the other end of the line. "Okay," Lena said. Her voice was now flat, devoid of emotion. It was the voice she used when she was about to call a time of death. "I tried, Dad. I really did. I'm coming back. And I am not coming alone. I am calling social services. I'm calling the state. If you won't let me help you, I will find someone who can make you. I will not let you die alone on that mountain, worshipping a—" Sam didn't hear the rest. A red-hot, blinding rage, darker than any battlefield fury, consumed him. Social services. The white man's words. The white man's solution. To take him from his home. To put him away. He didn't hang up. He roared, an incoherent sound of pure pain, and tore the phone from the wall. The plastic base shattered, wires spraying from the plaster. He stood there, panting, the dead receiver still clenched in his fist. His eyes scanned the room, wild, looking for something else to break. They landed on the medical alert system. The gray base unit sat on the kitchen counter, its small green power light glowing. A single, arrogant, watchful eye. And in the charging cradle sat the white plastic pendant with its big, red, insulting button. The symbol of his daughter's mistrust. The leash. "Rah!" He swept his arm across the counter. The base unit flew, its power cord ripping from the socket. It crashed onto the floor. But the pendant, lighter, flew further, clattering against the log wall and landing near the hearth. Silence. Sam was breathing like he'd run a mile. Ghost, agitated by the violence, had risen. He walked cautiously to the dead phone, sniffing the tangled wires. He nudged the broken base on the floor. Then, his attention was drawn by the sound. The gray box, now unplugged, had an internal battery, and the crash had triggered something, a fault. It began to emit a high-pitched, steady, electronic beeping. It was a sound Ghost had never heard, and it was deeply unpleasant. It hurt his ears. He padded over to the beeping box, sniffing it. The sound continued. He nudged it with his nose. The beeping continued. Sam, slumped against the wall, was too spent to move. "Shut up," he muttered at the box. Ghost looked from the box to the other white object that had flown with it, the pendant. It lay on the floor stones. He walked over to it. He sniffed it. It had his daughter's smell on it and Sam's, and it had the big red button, just like the one he'd seen on the now broken telephone. He was curious. This small thing seemed connected to the larger, screaming thing. He nudged it. His nose pressed the button. Instantly, the beeping from the base unit stopped. It was replaced by a new sound. A synthesized female voice, loud and clear, projected from the gray box on the floor. "Connecting to emergency services. Please wait." Sam's blood turned to ice. He leapt across the room. "No," he bellowed. "No, stop." "We have a connection," the voice announced. "This is a recorded line. Do you require emergency assistance?" Ghost, terrified by Sam's roar and the sudden voice, had jumped back, his ears flat. "No, mistake," Sam yelled at the box. He grabbed the pendant from the floor as if to strangle it. "I don't need help. It was a mistake." "Sir, we detect a fall. Please state your name and location." "Damn it, shut up." Sam, in a final blind panic, grabbed the gray box from the floor and ripped the back cover off. Tearing out the battery, the cabin was plunged back into a ringing, profound silence. Sam was on his hands and knees, trembling, the broken pieces of the alert system around him. Ghost sat by the hearth, his heart hammering. He watched the old man, his yellow eyes wide and alert. He did not understand the words, but he understood, with perfect animal clarity, what had just happened. The small white object, the red button. When pressed, it made the human voices come. The broken pieces of the alert system lay on the floor, monuments to his rage. Sam sat in his armchair, not moving, as the light in the cabin bled from gray to a deep, bruised purple. He was hollowed out. The anger had burned through him, leaving nothing but the cold ash of despair. Lena was coming. Social services, the state, they would take him. They would put him in a white room with soft walls and feed him pills. He would die under fluorescent lights, his name on a plastic bracelet. And Ghost. What would they do to Ghost? A bullet. Dave had said it. A bullet for the only living thing that understood him. The wind was picking up again. It wasn't a mournful sound this time. It was a low, rhythmic thrumming. A pulse. Sam closed his eyes. The cabin walls seemed to melt away, the smell of pine and wood smoke replaced by something else. Something wet, heavy, and rotten. The smell of the jungle. The wind's thrumming grew louder, a steady, percussive wop, wop, wop that beat against the air. Rotor wash. He wasn't in Pine Ridge. He was in a clearing, the air thick and hot. He was 19 again, his face painted, his M16 heavy in his hands. "LZ is hot," someone screamed. "Get to the tree line." The thrumming in his ears was deafening. He could feel the vibration in his chest. Ben, move," he yelled. His friend, Dave Black Elk's father, Ben, just a boy of 18, was staring at him, his eyes wide with a terror so pure it was almost holy. I can't, Sam. I can't feel my legs. Move, damn it. A frozen branch from the pine tree outside the cabin cracked under the weight of the wind, a sharp, clean snap. Rifle fire. The sound was too close. Incoming. Sam dove from his armchair, not as an old man, but as a young soldier. He hit the floorboards, rolling, his bad legs screaming as if the shrapnel had just struck. He was no longer in his cabin. He was in the mud. Ben, get down, he roared, crawling, dragging his useless leg behind him. Ghost was on his feet, his ears flat, his body trembling. The air in the cabin had changed. The old man was on the floor, his scent no longer just Sam, but a sharp, terrifying spike of fear and adrenaline. The wolf whined, a low, distressed sound, confused by this waking nightmare. I'm coming for you, Ben, Sam gasped. He was crawling toward the hearth, but in his mind, he was pulling himself toward his friend. The fire in the stove was not a fire. It was a burning Huey. We're pinned down. Cover me. Cover me. He reached the hearth, his hand touching the hot stones, and he recoiled, not from the heat, but as if he'd touched his friend's wound. No. No, Ben. He looked down. In his mind, Ben Black Elk was lying in the mud, his chest a dark, wet ruin. Medic, Sam screamed, the sound tearing from his throat. Medic. He tried to put his hand over his friend's wound, but his own hand was shaking too hard. He looked up, and the NVA soldier was there, standing over them, a silhouette against the burning sky. Sam tried to raise his rifle, but his arms were too heavy. And then, the pain. It wasn't his leg. It was his chest. A colossal, crushing weight, as if the helicopter itself had landed on him. It wasn't shrapnel. It was a giant, hot hand, squeezing his heart into a fist. He couldn't breathe. The jungle, the fire, the enemy soldier. They all vanished, replaced by a new, singular, internal terror. Ben, he gasped. He was back in the cabin. He could see the floorboards, the armchair, the terrified white wolf staring at him. But the pressure was still there. It was stealing his air. He clawed at his chest. His heart gave one violent, stuttering kick, like a dying engine. He fell onto his side. The world was shrinking to a small, dark pinpoint of light. He saw the wolf, Ghost, leaning over him, his yellow eyes wide. But it wasn't a wolf. It was Ben, leaning over him, trying to say something. I'm coming, Ben, Sam whispered. His hand, which had been reaching for his friend, fell limp onto the floorboards. The cabin was silent, save for the thrumming of the wind and the new, ragged, shallow breaths of the old man. Ghost crept closer. He nudged Sam's face. It was clammy. He licked his hand. It was cold. The wolf let out a high, thin whine. The old man, his protector, his Thatcha, was still. His eyes were open, but he was not there. The scent of fear was fading, replaced by a new, chemical scent. The smell of sickness, the smell of death, panic. It was a cold, sharp scent that flooded Ghost's senses, coming off the still form of the old man. The wolf nudged Sam's face, his nose cold and wet against the man's waxy gray skin. There was no response. He licked Sam's hand, the one that had held the carving, the one that had fed him. It was cold. Ghost let out a low, distressed whine, a sound that came from deep in his chest. He pushed his powerful shoulders against Sam's torso, trying to roll him, to shake him awake. The man was a dead weight, his limbs loose, his head rolling with emotion, eyes half open and vacant. He was alone. The man, his pack, his Thatcha, was broken. Ghost paced a frantic circle, his claws clicking on the floorboards. His eyes darted around the room, searching for something, for help. But the cabin was empty. The wind howled outside, a mockery. The man's daughter was gone. The ranger was gone. It was just him and the dying fire and the cold body. He whined again, a higher, desperate pitch. He looked at the broken phone, sniffing the wires. Nothing. He looked at the door, as if to summon help, but the world outside was a vast, cold enemy. His eyes fell on the hearth. Among the wood debris and dust, near where the man had fallen, lay the white plastic object. The pendant. It was still there from the night of rage. A connection fired in the wolf's mind, a complex equation of memory and instinct. The smell of rage, the object flying, the box screaming, the man yelling, the button, the red button, and then voices. The voices. The red button brought the human voices. He darted over and snatched the pendant from the floor. The plastic was smooth and strange in his mouth. He trotted back to Sam, his heart hammering against his ribs. He dropped the pendant on Sam's chest. It lay there, white against the dark flannel. Press it. He nudged Sam's hand with his muzzle, pushing it toward the kaikum pendant. The hand was heavy and limp. It slid off the plastic. Press it. Ghost nudged the pendant itself, a frantic, pushing motion. Nothing. The button was too small, too recessed. He tried to paw at it, but his claws were too dull, sliding off the smooth plastic. Frustration, hot and desperate, seized him. The man was growing colder. The scent of sickness was thick, the smell of life fading. He could not fail. Ghost lowered his head again. He used his nose to pin the pendant against Sam's sternum. He felt the small raised circle of the button. He centered it. Then, with a deliberate, desperate force, he pressed his muzzle down, shoving his nose into the small, red circle. There was a soft click. A second of absolute terrifying silence. Ghost lifted his head, panting, his saliva glistening on the plastic. Across the room, the battered, broken gray base unit, lying on its side, flickered. Its backup battery, drained low from the earlier assault, gave one last surge. A small green light blinked on. A static hiss filled the cabin. And then, the voice. Loud, mechanical, and horrifyingly alive. Connecting to emergency services. Please wait. Ghost jumped back, his ears flat, his body coiled. He looked at the box, then at the man. "We have a connection," the voice announced, tinny and urgent. "This is a recorded line. A signal has been received from Unit 311. Do you require emergency assistance?" The voice echoed in the tiny cabin, demanding an answer. But there was no answer. Only the ragged, shallow breathing of the wind and the profound, terrible silence of Sam Coldhand. The digital voice repeated its question into the void, a cold, automated plea for a response that would not come. After 30 seconds of silence, the system, following its protocol, disconnected the voice. It had its signal. It had its location. It placed its next call. 200 miles away, in a sterile, bright hospital corridor in Denver, Lena Coldhand's phone vibrated against her scrubs. She had just finished a 16-hour shift. She was exhausted, her mind numb, her feet aching. She saw the unknown 800 number and almost declined it. But her nurse's intuition made her swipe accept. "This is Lena Coldhand. Ms. Coldhand, this is Med Alert Services. We are the emergency contact for Samuel Coldhand. We received a man-down signal from his unit at 21:47 Mountain Time." Lena's exhaustion vanished, replaced by a cold, electric dread. Her back went rigid. What do you mean? Is he... Did you talk to him?" "The unit was non-responsive to voice commands, ma'am." We have already dispatched local 911. We are calling to inform you. One moment. Our dispatcher said the audio link was live for a moment. We have a recording. Do you want... Play it. Put it through. Just, what did you hear? Ma'am, it was unclear. There was static and what sounded like labored breathing and another sound. What sound? Lena's voice was sharp. The operator hesitated. We are patching the audio link back through to your line. It's live. The phone line clicked. The sterile hum of the hospital was gone, replaced by a sound that made Lena's blood freeze. It was static, yes, but beneath it was a terrible, shallow, wet sound. A breath in, then a rattling breath out. It was the sound of a dying man's lungs. "Dad?" she whispered into the phone. "Dad, can you hear me?" Only the awful breathing answered. And then, from the other end of the line, coming through the speaker as if from the end of the world, was a new sound. It was high, desperate, and primal. A long, keening, heartbreaking cry. The sound of a wolf howling indoors. "Oh my God," Lena choked. She tore the phone from her ear, her hands shaking so badly she could barely press the screen. She disconnected, her mind racing. 911 is on the way. Too slow. The roads are bad. The wolf. Her fingers flew, dialing a number she knew by heart. Dave Black Elk's truck was parked on a ridge overlooking the reservation, the engine idling. He had been patrolling, restless, unable to shake Sam's fury from his mind. His radio was on, but he was listening to the wind. When his cell phone blared, he snatched it. "Lena? He's down!" she screamed, her voice a raw sound of panic. "Dave, he's down. The alert, it went off. I heard him. He's not responding. And Ghost. I heard him, Dave. He's howling. 911 is on the way, but it's not fast enough. Please." Dave's blood went cold. The elders were right. Sorrow had come. "I'm on my way," he said, his voice dropping into the flat, steady calm of a man who knew what had to be done. "I'm 10 minutes out. Lena, listen to me. Where are you?" "I'm at the hospital in Denver. Okay. Listen. The EMTs will need an escort. The animal is agitated. I'll meet them at the turnoff. You stay put. I'll call you as soon as I know." "No," she cried. "I'm driving. I'm leaving now." "Lena, that's a 4-hour drive. You can't..." "He's my father," she screamed. And she hung up. Dave slammed his truck into gear, the tires spinning on the frozen dirt, and fishtailed onto the main road, his official lights flashing, cutting a path through the darkness. He sped, his mind racing faster than the truck. The howl, a wolf howling over a fallen man. What would he find? A tragedy? A protector? He hit the main highway, pushing 90, his radio crackling to life as he called in a code 3, demanding the fastest ambulance, reporting a man down, an unsecure animal on sight. The ambulance was just behind him at the turnoff to Sam's road, as promised. He led the way, his truck a bulwark against the darkness. They slid and skidded up the muddy, half-frozen track, the lights of the 2 vehicles, one for saving life, one for enforcing law, slicing through the black trees. They rounded the final bend, the cabin coming into view. And Dave slammed on his brakes. The Yak ambulance behind him swerved, its siren dying with a gasp. There, in the combined glare of their headlights, stood a figure. It was Marcus. He was drunk, swaying, his face illuminated in the flashing blue and red lights. And in his hands, he held a long, black shotgun. "I heard it," Marcus roared, his voice thick with whiskey and terror. He pointed the shotgun, not at them, but at the cabin door. "I heard the devil. It's howling for the old man's soul. I'm here to end it. Dave threw open his truck door. "Marcus, put the weapon down. This is tribal police. Put it down." The EMTs, two young men, were frozen in their ambulance, their gurney half deployed. "You don't understand," Marcus cried, his eyes wild. He was aiming at the dark window of the cabin. "It's in there, the beast. It's time to send it back to hell." Dave drew his service weapon, his hand steady. He was caught, a drunk with a gun, a dying man inside, and a wolf trapped with them both. The night had just become a powder keg. The world was compressed into a chaotic, flashing triangle of violence. Outside, Dave Black Elk was pinned between two opposing laws. In front of him, Marcus, his face a grotesque mask of booze and fear in the flashing red and blue lights, held the shotgun, its muzzle aimed at the cabin. Behind him, the two EMTs were stalled, their life-saving equipment useless, their path blocked. "Wolf!" The senior EMT, a man named Harris, yelled, his hand up. "Wolf, we have a visual. We cannot enter the structure. Sir," he shouted at Dave, "the animal is hostile. You have to clear the animal, or we can't get to the patient." Dave was trapped. His oath as a cop, his duty as a Lakota, his promise to Lena. They were all colliding. "He's distracted," Marcus roared, sensing the chaos. He saw the EMTs were stalled at the door, and through the opening, he saw the white flank of the wolf, standing over the fallen man. "It's the devil. He's guarding the body." Marcus raised the shotgun to his shoulder. He was aiming true. He was aiming past the EMTs, through the open door, straight at Ghost. "For God's sake," he screamed, "I'll do it myself." "No," Dave roared. Dave moved, but he didn't move toward Marcus. He didn't move toward the wolf. He took 2 steps back, planting his feet. He raised his service pistol, his arm rigid, his hand steady. He didn't aim at Marcus. He didn't aim at Ghost. He aimed at the sky. He fired. The sound was not a crack. It was a flat, deafening, percussive blast that ripped through the night, a sound of absolute authority. Everyone froze. Marcus, shocked by the explosion so close to him, flinched violently, his grip loosening. The EMTs ducked. In that single, echoing moment of silence, Dave was no longer just a ranger. He was a warrior. "Tribal police!" His voice bellowed, a drill sergeant's roar that left no room for argument. He slammed his shoulder into Marcus, a clean, brutal tackle. Marcus hit the side of the ambulance, the Hawker shotgun clattering uselessly on the gravel. Before Marcus could even gasp, Dave had his knee on the man's chest and the muzzle of his pistol pressed against his temple. "Don't you move," Dave hissed, the words cold as the gravel. He fumbled for his cuffs, securing Marcus's hands. "He's secure," Dave yelled at the EMT, still on his knee. "Get in there. Get the man." "Negative, sir," Harris shouted back, his voice strained. He was at the threshold again. "The animal's still hostile. He's over the patient. We can't—" Jesus, he's huge. Inside, Ghost was fulfilling his final duty. He was standing over Sam's body, his thacha, his pack. These new, strange-smelling men were coming for him. Ghost lowered his head, his lip curling back over white teeth. A low, guttural vibration came from his chest. It was not a sound of aggression. It was a promise of death. "You will not touch him." Dave, still holding Marcus down, was desperate. He looked at the EMTs, at the dark door, at the wolf's defiant shadow. He was failing. Then he remembered. The line. He fumbled for his cell phone, which he had jammed into his chest pocket. The call with Lena. It was still active. He saw the timer, 00:10:32. He hit the speakerphone button, holding the phone up in the cold, thin air. "Lena, He's blocking them. The wolf. He's protecting Sam. He won't let them in. Call him. Call him now. The phone's small speaker crackled, broadcasting Lena's voice, thin, distant, and hysterical, across the chaotic yard. What? Oh, God. Dave? What's happening? I hear the siren. Ghost. The wolf froze. His head snapped up. The growl died in his throat. That voice. It was not the man voice of the ranger. It was the woman voice. The one that smelled of sadness and fear. The one that belonged to his Thatcha. Ghost! Lena's voice screamed from the phone, the connection digitized and strange. It's okay. They are there to help. They are friends. Please, let them help him. The wolf was torn. He looked at the strangers at the door. He looked at the still, cold body of Sam. He heard the woman's voice, pleading, Ghost, please, he's my dad. Stand down. Let them help him. Stand down. The command, raw and full of anguish, cut through the wolf's protective haze. He understood the pain in her voice. It matched his own. With a low, pained whine, Ghost took one step back, then another. He retreated. He didn't go to the bedroom. He backed away to the darkest corner of the cabin, by the cold hearth where he had first been saved. He sat down, his body coiled and trembling, his head low. But his eyes, two burning yellow flames, never left Sam. Harris, the EMT, saw the retreat. He's clear. He's in the corner. We're going in. The two EMTs burst through the door, their medical bags clattering, their movements practiced and fast. They swarmed the old man, a whirlwind of modern medicine in the ancient, quiet room. Patient is cold, gray, breathing, shallow. Pupils are fixed. V-fib. Get the paddles. Charge to 200. Dave Black Elk finally stood, pulling Marcus up by the cuffs, the man's drunken bravado replaced by terrified sobbing. Dave watched the EMTs work, the blue-white flash of the defibrillator illuminating the cabin's dark interior. It lit the face of the old man on the floor, and for a split second, it lit the face of the white wolf, watching, waiting in the shadows. The fluorescent lights of the hospital room hummed, a sterile, relentless sound that Sam Coldhand hated. He'd been awake for hours, floating in a fog of medication and memory, the steady beep of the heart monitor, a pale imitation of the wind. The world was too bright, too clean, too white. Lena was asleep in the chair by his bed, her head on her arms, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled. Even in sleep, her face was etched with an exhaustion that tore at him. He'd almost left her. He remembered the jungle. He remembered the cold floor. He remembered yellow eyes. Ghost? His voice was a dry croak, a broken-sounding thing. Lena's head snapped up, her eyes wide and unfocused, then locking on his. Dad. She was across the room in a second, her hands, warm and professional, on his wrist, his forehead. Dad, you're awake. Oh my God, you're awake. The wolf, Sam managed, and the words thick. He's okay, she said. Then her voice broke, the dam of her professional composure shattering. Tears streamed down her face. He's fine. He's at home. Home. Dave's been taking care of him. He's been driving out every day, feeding him, checking on him. He's waiting. Sam tried to process this. Dave. The elders. The betrayal. Dave. He saved us, Dad, Lena said, sinking back into the chair, her hands clutching his. He saved all of us. Dave was... She shook her head, unable to recount the chaos. But it was Ghost, Dad. It was him. I remember the button, Sam whispered, the memory surfacing like a dream. They have the recording, Lena said, her voice full of awe. The medical company. They sent it to the police as evidence. It's just silence. And your breathing? And then him. This terrible, desperate, whining sound. And the sound of his nose pressing the button, over and over. They said he held it down for 30 seconds. He wouldn't let go. She told him everything. About Marcus's arrest, the shotgun, the charges of assault and endangerment. She told him how Dave had stood between the gun and the wolf, and then between the wolf and the EMTs. A week later, Sam was sitting up, his heart still bruised but steady, when the door to his room opened. It was Dave Black Elk. He was in his uniform, but he'd left his hat in the truck. He stood at the door, his gaze steady, his face unreadable. "Uncle," he said. "Dave," Sam replied, his voice stronger. The two men looked at each other, the silence thick with the things that had been said. "Marcus is facing federal charges," Dave said, his voice quiet, official. "He'll be gone a long time." "Good," Sam grunted. "The tribal council, they met. They heard the recording. They heard my testimony." Sam waited. "The elders, they're in the waiting room," Dave said, his voice cracking slightly. They want to see you, to apologize." Sam's breath hitched. This was a deeper healing than any medicine. The elders came in, 3 old men, their faces like maps of the land itself. The eldest, Chief Joseph Red Cloud, walked to Sam's bed. He did not speak of laws or spirits. He placed his weathered hand on Sam's shoulder. "You have a strong family, Samuel," the old man said, his voice like stones rolling in a river. "We mistook a protector for a prisoner. Wakan, the Great Spirit, it works in ways we do not always understand. The Tiwahe, the family, is the most sacred thing. You have a true Tiwahe." He nodded, a gesture of profound respect. The shame was lifted. The day Sam came home, the air was crisp, the sky a piercing, cloudless blue. Lena drove him, her hand steady on the wheel. Dave's truck was already parked in the yard. Sam's legs were weak, and he leaned on a cane. But he refused the wheelchair. He would walk into his own home. Dave and Lena flanked him as he climbed the porch steps. The cabin door was open. The hearth was clean, a new fire crackling in the stove. And in the center of the room, he stood. Ghost was bigger, leaner, his white coat shining in the firelight. He stood, unmoving, his yellow eyes fixed on Sam. Sam stood in the doorway, his heart so full it ached. "Thatcha," Sam whispered. "Friend." The wolf did not run. He did not jump. He walked slowly, with a deliberate, regal grace, across the room. He stopped at Sam's feet. He looked up at the old man. Then, he pushed his great, wide head against Sam's hand, a firm, warm pressure that was more than a greeting. It was a confirmation. "You are here. I am here. We are." Sam dropped his cane, his hand sinking deep into the thick fur of the wolf's neck, holding on, anchoring himself. Lena stepped up, no longer afraid. She placed her hand on her father's shoulder. Dave Black Elk stood in the doorway, his hand on the frame. He didn't enter. He just watched, a quiet guardian for this strange, new, sacred family. Sam looked around the room, at his daughter, whose fear had become understanding, at the young ranger, whose law had become wisdom, and at the spirit of the mountain, who had become his heart. He was no longer a man being erased. He was no longer waiting to die. He was home. He was Lakota. He was Samuel Coldhand. And he was not alone. Thank you for sharing this journey with us. The story of a man and a wolf who reminded each other how to live. If you believe in the kind of bond that Sam and Ghost shared, a loyalty that needs no words, let us know you're part of this family. Just leave the single word friend pros in the comments below. That's all. We'll know you were listening with us. And if you believe that stories of courage and connection like this one deserve to be told, I invite you to subscribe and become part of our circle. We have so many more stories waiting. Stay with us. The next one may be the one you've been waiting for.